समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Print Security Code. Loyal viewers like you, I know, have come to appreciate the Print's high quality of on-ground reportage and its deeply researched, careful analysis. But this kind of journalism needs money. I hope you'll consider taking a subscription to the Print by clicking in the link below. The stage was carefully set and the actors perfectly costumed for the performance of their nationhood. Soldiers in creased uniforms, armed police in bright maroon sweaters, a man in a blue business suit, a black-robed cleric. To them, General Asim Munir said, I quote, "Those who fight Allah and His Prophet and bring strife to the land will be punished in this life as well as the afterlife. This is your law and this is Allah's law. And because you are enforcing Allah's law, you are His soldiers. There is no force on earth which can defeat you." Less than 2 hours after President Donald Trump announced an immediate ceasefire between India and Pakistan on Saturday, Srinagar and Jammu began to be targeted by drones. "This is no ceasefire," Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah said. There are stories, possibly apocryphal, that the missiles fired were inscribed with the names of Masood Azhar Alvi's slain kin, a gesture of support for the internationally proscribed terrorist laws. That temporary unraveling of the ceasefire, or the belief of some Pakistani commanders that it did not apply to them, showed that at least some in the force have taken the words of General Asim earnestly. They answer to only the law of God, not their commander-in-chief. To India, this should be an education on the real reasons why punitive retaliation to secure deterrence against terrorism hasn't worked in the past. For many in Pakistan's forces, as well as influential forces in its civil society and politics, the use of violence against India isn't a means to an end. It is in fact the end, the inexorable outcome of a state of irreducible hatred, which can only be requited with a final war of annihilation. Listening in to the Pakistan army when it talks to itself and thinks no one's listening, the scholar C. Christine Fair taught us that religious millenarianism is core to the institution's idea of itself. Through the Green Books, which are compilations of essays by mid-level officers published by the General Headquarters in Rawalpindi since at least 1990, Fair revealed a Pakistan army stripped of its veneer of sophisticated modernization. Instead, it was an institution riven with deep anxieties over religious identity, hatred of India, and a driving desire to reinvent Pakistan as a theocratic state. Tariq Majid, a naval officer writing in the 1990 Green Book, thus argued that, I quote, "The Islamic State, apart from the standing forces, keeps a volunteer force of the people and employs the other lot of able-bodied manpower to strengthen the other elements of the military system during wartime." This volunteer force, of course, is familiar to us. It comprises the jihadist proxies Pakistan used in Kashmir in both 1947-48 and in 1965, and used against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. In the 1994 Green Book, Brigadier Saifi Ahmad Naqvi proposed that it was critical to remember that Pakistan, I quote again, is an ideological state based on the ideology of Islam. Therefore, he went on, I quote, "The existence and survival of Pakistan depend on the complete implementation of Islamic ideology in a true sense." This, he went on, meant that the army was responsible not just for guarding Pakistan's territorial integrity, but, I quote, the ideological frontiers to which the country owes its existence. Following the events of 9/11, this belief congealed into a kind of maniacal conspiratorialism. Even as his forces fought alongside the United States against the Taliban in Afghanistan, Brigadier Munir Mahmood warned in the 2002 Green Book that Pakistan was being cast as, I quote, the torchbearer of the Muslim Ummah by the biased Western media and the Jewish lobby. Thus, it was, I quote again, likely to be the target of these forces. Later, in the 2008 Green Book, Brigadier Waqar Hassan Khan argued that, I quote, the superpowers' entry into the Middle East and West Asia was not possible without a Pearl Harbor. 9/11 was either created or supported to be labelled as the second Pearl Harbor. The eminent diplomat and scholar Hussain Haqqani, in his sharply etched History of Pakistan, observes that the Pakistan Army's jihadist project was, I quote, not just the inadvertent outcome of some decisions by some governments. Instead, he argued, the Pakistani state's use of Islam gradually evolved into a strategic commitment to jihadi ideology. In 1956, the country's first constitution declared Pakistan an Islamic republic, a notion, by the way, unknown to classical Islamic theology, and mandated that no laws repugnant to the Quran and Hadith be passed. General Ayub Khan removed the prefix Islamic from Pakistan's name, but nonetheless was forced to appoint a council of clerics to guide his country's affairs. His successor, the hard-drinking, womanizing General Yahya Khan, actually allied with Islamists in East Pakistan. Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, in turn, bowed to clerical pressure and pushed forward with anti-minorities measures, eventually declaring Islam the state religion. The crisis of 2025 should prompt India's strategic establishment to recognize that this system of belief, which rests on a bedrock of faith in a coming apocalypse that will later open human passage to utopia, cannot be deterred, at least in a simple military sense. The crisis of 2001-2002, which followed the terrorist attack on Parliament House in New Delhi, led General Pervez Musharraf to institute a ceasefire and scale back cross-border terrorism. The general wasn't deterred though. His primary consideration was to protect his country's flailing economy as well as intense pressure from America. For General Musharraf and the circle around him, the 2001-2002 crisis was actually evidence that their nuclear weapons had deterred India, not of military weakness in the face of a conventionally superior enemy. This learning was to prove of use to his successor, General Parvez Kayani, who authorized the 26/11 attack, confident India would not go to war. The 2016 cross-line of control raids conducted by India similarly led to a series of retaliatory Fedayeen strikes across Kashmir and a marked rise in terrorist violence over the coming years. The 2019 Balakot strikes, again, were perceived in Pakistan's strategic community as a victory for the country, since India had missed its targets, lost a jet, and failed to prevent the bombing of its brigade headquarters at Rajouri. For some in India, the answer seems to lie in escalating levels of coercion against Pakistan to the point where deterrence sets in. Theorists of war have long warned, though, that no war can guarantee that outcome. The 19th century general and theoretician Karl von Clausewitz famously argued against the very idea of a total victory. I quote, "Everything in war is simple, but the simplest thing is difficult. All actions take place in something virtually akin to dusk, which in addition, like fog or moonlight, gives objects an exaggerated size and a grotesque view." Even when a nation-state was beaten and its forces destroyed, Clausewitz warned, this did not guarantee permanent victory. Like the Austrians and Russians who lost to France in 1805, just as Pakistan did in 1971, defeated enemies rise again, harboring fantasies of vengeance. Thus, it was prudent to negotiate what could be had rather than hold out for a maximal end. That is what India did in 2001-2002 and again in 2019. A ceasefire on the line of control limiting infiltration, and the placing of restraints against terrorist attacks on its major cities. Each agreement held, but only until the next attack. Vowing that every future terrorist attack will thus be treated as an act of war is thus just polemic. No nation state in the world, not America, not Russia, not China, has done this because it is unaffordable and impossible to execute. Even the Americans are struggling against a tiny adversary, the Houthi insurgents in Yemen. This polemic will not be taken seriously by adversaries and will do nothing to deter them. India needs a long-term strategy forged with a cold, calm mind. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you again for watching this episode of Security Code.